Hello, everyone. I'm your narrator from Grave Hush, and I'm here to help you unwind tonight. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now get cozy, take a deep breath, let your body sink into the stillness. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Our first story tonight. Let's begin. I was paid $50,000 to dine with a stranger. I was broke as shit, flatlined financially, emotionally, existentially. Whether by poor choices in my youth or plain old shit luck, life spat me out straight from high school and onto the streets. Drugs followed, rehab, then relapse. I drifted, from couches to shelters to squatting in abandoned homes. Steady income? Never heard of it. So when I saw the email, I almost deleted it without reading. I figured it was just another rejection for one of my poorly written job applications until the header caught my attention. Dinner with me for $50,000. I'm not exactly attractive. Even before addiction wrecked the few good features I had, I didn't have much going for me. My eyes had sunk into my skull like they wanted to disappear. My skin had forgotten what hydration felt like. So this email? Ridiculous. I had no looks, no resume, no justification for being chosen. But I'd just left a shelter, and 50 grand was a dream bigger than anything I'd ever held. So I read on. It was from a domain I'd never seen before. Shepard K at snkcompunctionfirm.com. The message read, "Dear recipient, I trust this message finds you well. I invite you to join me for dinner at home." This is not a romantic offer. You will be compensated handsomely for your time, provided you adhere to the following terms. Remain for the full meal until I pay the bill and escort you out. Do not pay for anything yourself. Wear formal attire. If you don't own a suit, one will be provided at the entrance. It will fit. Any breach will void all compensation. To accept, reply. A time and date will be sent. To decline, disregard this message. Did it seem insane? Absolutely. But desperation makes fools of us all. The kind of fool that doesn't ask for explanation, just a fork and a seat. So I replied, "Hello, Shepard. Thank you for your generous offer. I accept your terms and will be there. May I ask a few questions about this proposition? Again, thank you." I didn't expect a response. Maybe a phishing scam, maybe nothing. But seconds later, a reply came. Monday at 6 p.m. at... Questions may be asked at dinner. Thank you for your cooperation. More cryptic bullshit. That's when I gained the smallest amount of common sense and decided to look into whoever this guy was. This was clearly his business email, so I Googled the domain S&K Compunction Firm. I was expecting some big group of lawyers off the name alone. But nope, no law firm. Just a single office tucked in a strip mall. No products, no services. Just a photo of the branch manager. Despite the fact that the office barely looked big enough for two people and the title implied multiple locations, yet I couldn't even find a second one. What did they do? Solutions? No specifics, just that one word. I thought about backing out. Probably should have. But when you've got nothing left, hesitance starts looking like a luxury. I had nothing to lose. So I took the chance. Between drug-fueled stupors and getting my ass kicked once or twice, Monday crept up on me like bruises do. Slow, unseen, then sudden. I didn't have anything formal, so I threw on the only white button-up shirt I owned and some gray slacks. Both had stains I couldn't explain, and no iron had graced their surface in years. Still, they were the fanciest clothes I had. None of it mattered. The second I hobbled into the restaurant, the greeter, if you could even call them that, handed me a dry-cleaned suit without a word and pointed to the bathrooms. I took the hint. This suit seemed expensive. Real Men's Warehouse type shit. It fit perfectly, just like the email said. Too perfectly, actually. The cuffs landed exactly at my wrist bone. The collar rested like it knew my neck's shape already. I didn't have the time or money to question it. I walked back out. The place had a strange charm. Soft lighting spilled across tablecloths in smooth pools of warmth. Ornate picture frames lined the walls, filled with abstract paintings that felt a bit too familiar. Wood trim hugged every surface. Big, glittery curtains hung heavy like a wedding reception. It smelled like artificial plants and faded fabric. Soft jazz floated through the air and brushed against my ears. As I scanned the room, I realized something unsettling. When I first walked in, there were at least 4 tables of people laughing and enjoying themselves. It had been noisy and lively, but now, silent, empty, like a bell had rung that only I hadn't heard. Just a few bartenders, the mute greeter, and one bald man in a suit eerily similar to mine. I already knew who he was. His photo was the only thing of note I'd found when looking up the domain. The branch manager. I approached his table, and before I could ask if he was expecting me, he gestured to the chair across from him. He was an older man, maybe 50, with sad, droopy eyes. His nose was so thin and pointy it looked like a shark's fin. He seemed to have no nostrils at all. His jowls fluttered slightly as he spoke in a soft, low tone. "Thank you for coming, young man. It's good to finally see you," he said, extending an arm for a handshake. I tried my best to sound steady and firm despite my rising anxiety. Thank you, sir." The conversation that followed was surprisingly pleasant. The food was better than almost anything I had ever had, decadent and strangely nostalgic, as if it had been made just for me. He asked about my childhood, my current working conditions, and my family life. Most of these memories weren't pleasant, but it felt good to have someone simply listen. I reached a point where I started letting my guard down. He never interrupted, never judged, just watched. Then he got serious. He grabbed my wrist just as I lifted my fork. His grip was ice cold but steady, and his tone dropped. "What is something you wish you had never done?" "What?" I was shocked by his sudden seriousness. He didn't respond. He just stared, still and waiting. I swallowed. "I stole from my mom when she was dying. I was supposed to take care of her and protect her, but I spent her money on the stuff she told me to quit." A waitress appeared silently, depositing a small porcelain bowl before me. Inside sat a single seared scallop resting on a streak of bright red pepper coulis, its color staining the white plate like the shame I carried. The scallop's tender flesh gave way to a flash of heat, a reminder that some wounds never fully heal. A whisper of lemon zest lifted the flavors. He nodded, no judgment in his eyes, only something quietly accepting, then stood and excused himself to the restroom. As he left, I took a breath and tried to shake off the moment. Then I noticed it. The chandelier above us had one more bulb. Just one. The light it cast bent slightly at the edges, stretching the shadows under our plates. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Back to normal. Mostly. The jazz had slowed by a fraction. Notes now lingered a second longer than they should. He returned, looking subtly altered. His right side appeared younger and tighter. The left side remained unchanged. A crease near his mouth had vanished, and his smile felt less weighted. He asked again gently, "What's the kindest thing you've ever done?" I told him about a homeless kid I had let sleep in my car on a freezing night. I didn't know his name and didn't want anything from him. I just locked the doors and stayed up until morning in case someone tried anything. While his gaze lingered, another course arrived. A hollowed apple cradled a warm butternut squash soup. its sweetness tempered by sage oil. The apple's crisp rim framed the velvety broth, echoing the way I had sheltered that boy from the cold. Each spoonful felt like a soft promise of safety in a world so devoid of it. This time, as he listened, something in his face responded. His left eye seemed brighter, and the left side softened. He looked younger somehow. Maybe the light was playing tricks, or maybe the room had grown darker. He asked another question. "What's the worst lie you've ever told?" I hesitated. I had promised myself I would never recall this memory. Yet I felt compelled to tell the old man. When someone close to me overdosed, I could have saved them. I saw them but was frozen in fear, thinking I could be just like them. When the police came, I told them he was already dead when I got there. He nodded again. Still no judgment, just listening. I'm not sure how, but as I spoke, a new course appeared. A translucent steamed dumpling sat alone, its skin almost too delicate to touch. The moment I pierced it, a smoky chili broth gushed out, scorching my tongue with the sting of my lies. The gentle wrapper dissolved into nothing, leaving only the burn of a secret I thought I'd buried permanently. Then he stood and walked away, slower this time. His chair creaked slightly as he rose, and the floor beneath it curved outward in a way that made no physical sense. As I waited, I saw the wallpaper behind the bar begin to bubble faintly, like heat was pressing against it from inside. The curtains seemed heavier. The picture frames on the wall had begun to tilt, each at a different angle. Not much, but enough to notice, enough to make you wonder. The waitstaff didn't change plates. The glasses refilled themselves, and I started noticing something impossible. Everyone in the room had his face, not exactly, but similar, like a family of clones degraded with each repetition. The bartender blinked with one bulging eye, and the hostess's smile sagged like melting wax. When he came back, the distortion had grown wider. His jaw was uneven, one side shriveled, the other taut as barbed wire. The contrast on his face was more than physical now. It radiated something deeper, like halves of a personality that couldn't agree. He sat, eyes scanning me as if measuring the weight behind my silence. I wasn't sure if he was evaluating my soul or just admiring the way panic settled into the corners of my posture. His voice arrived softly, almost reverent. "What memory do you miss the most?" It took me a moment, not because I didn't know, but because I was afraid to admit how fragile the truth had become. "I used to swim in Lake Michigan every summer," I said slowly. "With friends, we'd throw ourselves off docks and scream about sea monsters and cold sandwiches. It was stupid, but I felt safe, like I didn't owe anything to anyone." Shepard's good eye glistened. A tear formed and trailed down the brighter side of his face. It lingered at his chin and disappeared into the folds. The darker side remained unflinching, its socket almost hollow now. I stared at him, unsure whether to thank him or run. He didn't speak. He just stood, his movements slower this time, calculated, weighty. The chair creaked like it hated being left alone. This bathroom break felt longer. The silence thickened and the music was barely audible. The overhead lights dimmed again, and this time they pulsed faintly. One of the picture frames fell sideways. The bartender wiped the same spot over and over, face devoid of emotion, eye bulging slightly. The wallpaper near the entrance was peeling, tiny tendrils reaching outward like roots. A fly circled the wine glass beside my plate but never landed, looping endlessly. I felt my chest tighten. Shepard returned. This time he didn't sit. He loomed. His face was wrong. The symmetry had given up. One eye bulged fully, twitching in quick spasms. The other was practically sunken. His mouth hung slightly open, but no breath escaped. He said nothing for several seconds, just watched me. Then finally, "Would you like dessert?" I stood almost instinctively. "I think I need the bathroom," I said. He nodded slowly. "Take your time." The restroom was too quiet, The mirror too clear. I leaned forward expecting to see my own ruin reflected. But instead, behind me in the mirror, Shepard waited. Not in the room, but in the reflection. His body was stretched, taller than before, suit shimmering like the surface of a pond. He smiled, both eyes twitching violently. I didn't scream or move. I just stepped back out, numb. The dining room was nearly gone. The walls had peeled upward toward the ceiling. Tables melted into spiraled masses of dark wood and cloth. The floor rippled like liquid stone. The curtains had vanished entirely, leaving a strange static haze where windows had once been. Shepard stood at the center, calm. "You've done well, young man," he said. "Repentance is never easy. The hardest part is accepting that you are no longer part of the world you knew." My knees threatened to give out. I wanted to argue, to scream, to run, but nothing in my body responded the way it used to. Everything had slowed except him. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask. He smiled gently, like a father comforting a child who had just asked the final, fated question. "This meal," he said, "is not payment. It's passage." "No," I whispered. "I walked here. I remember the shelter, the email." "You remember the drug," he said, cutting gently across my denial. "And the stall in the diner. You remember how cold the tile was. You remember how long it took for someone to find you." I shook my head as if it might rattle the truth loose, but it didn't help. My legs wouldn't move. "All we offer," he continued, "is a moment. One last conversation, one last taste, one last confession." The last of the room flaked away like ash in the wind. The table in front of us dissolved into nothing. Steam hissed upward from cracks in the floor that hadn't been there seconds before. Shepard extended his hand again. The suit he wore shimmered strangely, colors shifting like moonlight on ocean currents. Patterns swirled across the threads, faces maybe or shadows, I couldn't be sure. "You did well," he said quietly. "You were honest, that's all we ask." I felt tears on my cheek, though I didn't know how they got there. "What happens now?" Shepard looked over his shoulder. Behind him, the restaurant was finally gone. In its place, a hallway of shifting doors. Some open, some pulsing with warm light, others dimmed and sealed. "Now," he said, "you choose. Story 1 ends here. Now, let's begin story 2. When I was 10, my friends and I witnessed the things we never should have. I'm sure if you lived in a small town like me, you had some sort of urban legend, too. Maybe it was that the old man up the road killed his wife. Maybe it was a scary clown living in a gutter who killed kids. Whatever it was, it probably got less scary as you grew up and realized it was probably just older kids messing with you. But my town had something different, and I've been keeping it secret for 19 years. It all started the summer when my friends and I were 10 years old. We spent hours out by the creek or riding our bikes. It was, by all accounts, a typical childhood summer. Well, that all changed one day. It was me, my twin brother Ryan, and our friends Gil, Laura, and Steven. We were exploring the woods trying to find a perfect location to build a fort when we saw something strange. A tunnel. It was overgrown and looked to be almost ancient. "Relax," Steven said, sensing our unease. "It's probably just an old sewer pipe. Or something." "I don't know, Steve," Gil, our resident nerd, said. "It looks really old, kind of like the ancient temples that I saw in my National Geographic magazine." "Blah, blah, blah, stupid National Geographic magazine," Steven mocked. "Whatever. It looks cool. Let's go in." Before any of us could object, he rushed into the tunnel. It was decidedly not an old sewer pipe. It went on for seemingly miles with all sorts of ancient artifacts that I'm certain we probably could have sold to a museum and be set for life. I studied anthropology in university, and the things I saw in here didn't resemble artifacts of any known civilization. That's what frightens me the most. We finally got to the end of the tunnel. And wouldn't you know it, Gil seemed to be right. At the end of the tunnel was a room filled with gold and other offerings. A painting on the wall farthest from us depicted some sort of monster? Deity? God, I don't even know to describe it. Below the thing were humans, bowing down to it. There was writing on the wall, but it was in a language none of us recognize. Laura, when you get home, ask your dad for help with whatever this is, Gil said, reaching his hand out and feeling the painting. Laura's dad owned the library in our town and was probably the smartest guy here. Not a brag, considering our town was in a state with one of the highest illiteracy rates in the country. Laura nodded. I'll take a picture of it and show it to him after Mom goes to bed. She thinks I'm mowing my neighbor's lawns right now, she said, pulling her camera out. She took a picture of the writing, but took a few more of the temple. We left and kind of thought that was the end. Maybe Laura's dad could figure out what it said, but honestly, I don't think any of us were that invested at this point. The next day, as Ryan and I were getting dressed and ready for another day of whatever bullshit we had planned to do, my mom called us down. Ryan, Michael, your friend, wants to see you. We rushed downstairs and were shocked to see Laura, who usually had chores to do in the morning on her uncle's farm and would join us later in the day. She looked out of breath. Guys, I have to show you something. She was clutching the photos that she had taken yesterday. Did you get your dad to translate it? Ryan asked. Yeah, and I need to tell you, come on. She pulled us out of our house where Gil and Stephen were already waiting. Basically, he said it's some extinct language from the Middle East, she explained. The Middle East? We lived in America, Stephen said. Yeah, genius, we know. Shut up and let her finish. Gil nudged Stephen. And there's not really a direct translation, he said, but it basically says that a god who gets forgotten will unleash his wrath on the world by, destroying worldly treasures and something about making people remember. I'm not sure what they mean. Wow, so we found an old temple for a god? I asked. We could be rich. Well, that's not all. Look at some of the pictures I took. Laura pulled out some of her pictures. There was something in the background. It didn't look like any animal I've ever seen, but it wasn't exactly human either. It was tall, almost too tall for the frame, and it was staring right at us. Are you sure that it's not just like a camera flare or something? Gil asked. Oh yeah, a camera flare that made a creepy monster show up real smart, Ryan said, pushing Gil. As we walked around town theorizing on what it could be, an old pickup truck pulled up next to us. Laura, there you are. I've been looking for you everywhere. Oh yeah, sorry, Uncle, whatever. Get in the truck. I need to show you something. Thankfully, her uncle let us all ride in the back of the truck and go with them. I mean, I've seen fucked up creatures be born here, but ain't nothing like this, pardon my French. There in the barn was a baby goat, or what I assume was once a baby goat. It had sharp teeth, sharper than regular goats, and looked like its bones were all messed up. Weird thing is that it's still alive. Usually these things are dead by daylight. Laura's uncle said, bending down to inspect the goat. Even weirder still, I can't recall any of my goats being pregnant before last night. Like this thing just appeared. Well, I'll be off to milk the cow. Laura, let me know if anything happens to it. We all just stared at it in silence for a while. Unlike other deformed animals, it seemed to be doing just fine, thriving even. This is weird, right? Like weird, not cool weird, Stephen remarked, and for the first time he didn't have anything snarky to say. Totally. Maybe it has something to do with that thing we found yesterday, I said. We were all quiet for a while. No, it can't be. Just because some goat had a freaky baby doesn't mean the world is ending, Ryan said, walking away from the barn. Let's go, Michael. This is stupid. I wish he was right. I would give anything for him to have been right about that, because the next day things got weirder for us, and the day after that, and the day after that. The next day, Ryan and I woke up with scratches all over us. Both of us blamed the other, but I think it was just wishful thinking. Deep down, both of us knew that no kid or human, for that matter, could have made cuts that deep. It was like a nightmare only my friends and I could witness. Laura's dad's library had its entire religious section set on fire, everything else untouched. There were no signs of break-in. Stephen, who went to church on Sundays, would wake up extremely ill only on church days and be fine on Monday. Gil seemed to have it the worst. We actually didn't see him for a few days, which was out of the ordinary, so we went to check up on him. We entered his bedroom to find him in the corner, hunched over a book. It was massive and heavy-looking. Gil? Stephen said, looking concerned, which was unsettling to me because neither of them ever got along very well. He startled. Jesus, you scared me. Wait, I shouldn't say that. Guys, come in. I need to tell you something. Slowly, we all stepped forward, unsure if it was a trap or not. I've been studying a lot of religions. I couldn't find anything about that temple we found. It's gotta be a really, really old one, like one that got forgotten a long time ago. Dude, where is this going? I asked. It hurt me and Ryan to move a lot. There were scratches everywhere. They seemed to be growing every night. So when the writing said that thing about being forgotten and punishing the people who forgot him, it looks like we forgot about whatever this God was a long time ago. And it's mad now. That's it. That's why Stephen gets sick before church. That's why your dad's religious books all burned, Laura. And I don't really know what the scratches are doing, but it's gotta be something. Do you guys need bandages or something? Because I have some if you need, Gil explained. Yeah, I could probably go for some, Ryan said, lifting his shirt up. I did the same. Wait a minute, Laura said. Guys, stand like right next to each other. Our friends looked at us in shock. What, is it bad or something? I asked. Gil pushed us towards his mirror. Then we saw why they were so scared. This whole time we hadn't seen it, and it had been right under our noses, literally. Across both of our chests, the scratches made a shape. It was a face, but it looked familiar. Laura, do you still have those pictures you took in the temple? She pulled them out of her pocket. That monster in the background of the picture she took, it was there. The same face is on our skin and in the photo. Okay, this is messed up, man. I gotta go, Stephen stammered, and he ran out of Gil's room. We watched him run away through Gil's window. I'm scared, he said sheepishly. I feel like we did something by going in that temple, something bad. The next day, I guess he was proven right. Stephen didn't get home last night. There was a whole search for him and everything. No sign of him anywhere. That night, Gil, Laura, Ryan, and I all met up at Laura's uncle's farm. We walked through the fields trying to clear our heads. Suddenly, we heard a weird noise from the barn. As we went in to investigate, we saw that weird, deformed goat again. Even though it was only a few weeks old, it already looked fully grown. It looked at us. I don't know how to explain it, but its eyes... They didn't look like a normal animal's eyes. It pushed past us and started to walk away. I honestly have no idea what came over the four of us. With everything that was going on, we probably weren't in the right headspace, plus us being stupid 10-year-olds didn't help. We followed it all the way into the woods and back where it all started. That God-forsaken tunnel we never should have gone down. As the deformed, spiny goat led us down, we heard something. Chanting. At the end, in the room with the painting, was Stephen. He was moving, bowing down to the deity just like all of the people in the painting were, and chanting in some strange language. But he didn't look alive. His eyes seemed dead, like he was possessed. Stephen? Laura said finally. He looked up at us, tears in his eyes, and shook his head. It took us until then to realize the goat was gone. I opened my eyes for just a second, a choice I regret all the time. In its place, I saw something I'm not sure I can explain to this day. It was the thing in the picture, horns like a goat, massive in stature. The same thing on the painting. It was the god. "Guys," I said under my breath, "we have to go. Leave as quietly as you can. I'll get Stephen." Laura and Gil began to sneak out of the temple, but Ryan stopped me. "I'm helping too." Together we tried to grab Stephen, who was bowing to the god. It towered over us, seemingly basking in the feeling of being worshipped again. "Come on, dude, let's go," Ryan said, trying to pull him up. Stephen looked at us for a moment, shaking his head again. "You heard that stupid thing Laura's dad translated. If it gets forgotten, bad shit will keep happening. As long as I'm here, it's not forgotten. Go, just go. I promise it'll be okay." "What?" "No, I can't leave you. You're my friend," I said. "And you're my friends, dude. This is what friends are for. This is gonna sound stupid, but I love you guys. Please go. I don't want you getting hurt." Ryan and I stood in silence, not wanting to leave him. "Are you deaf? Go," I said, "go. Before it makes you stay, too." We ran, only looking back when we were fully out, Gil and Laura waiting for us. "Thanks, Steve," I said, holding back tears. All the adults told us the same thing, that we had seen something we shouldn't have, and that whatever we think we saw was just our brains trying to protect us from what actually happened. That they searched all over the woods and that there was no temple. Laura's dad and uncle didn't even believe us. They chalked it up to our imagination. Life went on, and we all grew apart, only seeing each other a few times a year. We don't really talk about that summer much. I mean, we all think about it, sure, but I don't think any of us want to be reminded of it. One day we had met up for dinner at Gil's place, and he wanted to show us something. In his basement was a shrine. A painting of that fucking entity decorated the walls. His two young kids sat praying to it. "Dude, what the fuck?" Laura asked. "This is insane." No, you guys don't get it. What Stephen did was great, and it bought us some time. But he's not going to live forever. What happens in 20, 30 years when he dies, huh? He'll be forgotten. What happens when we die? As long as he's not forgotten, we're safe, right? Now sit down with us and pray. "I'm not going to pray," Gil demanded. Laura, Ryan, and I got out of there pretty quick. So why am I writing this? Well, that thing's rules were pretty clear. As long as he's remembered, everything is fine, and there's nothing more permanent than writing. So if by some off chance somebody finds this at some point in time, maybe think a bit about what you remember and what you forget. Story 2 ends here now. We drift into story 3. I'm never going camping again. 3 years ago, my friend group decided to go on a camping trip. Not just going to an RV park and chilling kind of camping, but a proper tent and campfire trip. See, I'm a chronic glamper. If given the choice between roughing it out in the wild and chilling in an air-conditioned RV, I'm picking the RV every time. I enjoy my creature comforts, and I always have. Jake, one of the guys that runs in our little group, prides himself on being a true outdoorsman. As our group usually ends up taking trips to nearby lakes and national parks, it's become a bit of a strain between the two of us. It'd be one thing if he could respect that I'm not here to have the authentic experience and just want to have fun, but he can't. He needles and mutters about how they could be going to cooler places if only we didn't have to always glamp to get out of the damn house. I think that's why I accepted his trip proposal. Normally, I'd shut it down without question, but he'd been getting on my nerves for years. I accepted, thinking I'd prove once and for all that I can do it the rough and tough way. Maybe then he'd leave me the hell alone. Jake planned out a trip for us and our other two friends to a nearby lake on his family's property. When we arrived, I tried to ask where exactly in there we were going, but he'd just smirk. Relax, Maddie, the trail's marked. Even you won't get lost. Behind me, Chris and Luke, the other two coming with us, started up a conversation about s'mores and the supposed lake at the place we're going to. I felt my shoulders relax. Jake pulled out a compass and led us due north. According to him, we had to follow the compass a little ways until we found some trees he and his family had marked with red triangles. From there, you follow the path. The sun was going down by the time we spotted the first red triangle. I checked my phone, which said it was about 7:30. I also checked my signal, nothing. The pack straps were digging into my shoulders, and Luke was huffing as he trudged behind Chris and me. Funny. Despite the fact that Luke was obviously the least capable of us, it's still me that Jake liked to piss on. "Jake," I called. He paused and turned to me, a familiar irritated expression on his face. "Can we pause for a minute? I gotta take a piss." I didn't mention that Luke looked ready to puke, but he seemed to see it anyway when he looked at him. Jake huffed. "Don't get lost. I want to get to our site so we can get set up." I dropped my pack to the ground and started walking off the trail some. I could hear Luke wheezing behind me, obviously tired from the trek. The woods were quiet as I broke from the trail. I listened around for the birds or crickets, but it was dead silent. I glanced over my shoulder, making sure I was far enough away, and relieved myself. I zipped up and began to turn back when a branch cracked behind me. My head snapped back in the direction of the noise, but there was nothing. I turned and began walking back, and the crunching of leaves started behind me. I stopped, and so did the noise. It was my own footsteps. It had to be. But I started again, faster this time, and nearly broke into a run when the crunching just seemed to get louder and louder. I busted through the tree line, hitting the trail and whirling around to see what had been on my heels. Nothing. I stared out at the forest, waiting. There wasn't even a rustle of leaves from the wind, just silence. "Matt, let's go," Chris called, breaking my staring contest with the empty trees. I turned and jogged up the trail to catch up with them. As I picked my pack up off the ground, I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Did you guys hear that?" They all turned to look at me. "Hear what?" Luke answered. I couldn't quite bring myself to spit it out. After all, what had I heard? Leaves crunching when I walked? I shook my head. Jake continued to lead us towards the campsite, the red triangles leading us ever onwards. I looked at them closer as we passed. They were spray-painted on, with each tree being marked on both sides so that they could be seen no matter the direction you were coming from. Each marker was about 5 meters apart, and at any given time you could see the next few up ahead. The sun was nearly set when we broke through to the spot by the lake. I had to hand it to the bastard. The sight was beautiful. The trees all stood in glorious formation, shades of green mottled with the golden light of the sunset. The water shined a slightly muddy blue-gray, peppered with that same golden light stretching through the trees. We each picked a spot to pitch our tents. Luke and I got put on tent duty while Chris and Jake, our two more experienced outdoorsmen, went out to find some good sticks for firewood. As I finished getting my tent up, I glanced over at Luke. He was struggling to get the stakes in the ground. I signed, turning to help. We got his tent pitched and worked together to get the other two up. As we were finishing up with Chris's tent, the other two came back. I could see Jake looking over his tent, probably ready to find something to criticize me on. I was proud when he couldn't find anything. Chris and Jake threw some of the wood into the spot we designated as our fire pit, putting the rest of it close by for later use. They got the fire started, and we all idly chatted as the sun sank beneath the hills. Luke got up and brought his backpack over. As he unzipped the pack and reached in, I smiled. Hershey's chocolate bars, a box of graham crackers, giant fluffy marshmallows. I glanced over and saw my grin mirrored on Chris's face. Jake rolled his eyes but obligingly got up to grab some sticks to roast the marshmallows on. We gorged ourselves on granola bars and s'mores as the world around us turned dark. "Hey, Matt," Chris started. I looked at him, mouth and hands sticky with melted sugar. "Earlier today when you ran off to take a piss, what was that all about?" I looked at him puzzled. "You ran out of there like a bat out of hell. Then you were all, 'Did you guys hear that?'" He pitched his voice up and my eye twitched. He grinned goofily at me. I didn't quite know what to say. I didn't want to scare Luke, who was looking a bit nervous, and I still wasn't convinced I hadn't made the whole thing up. "I thought I heard something behind me," I settled on. Branch snapped kinda loud and it freaked me out. Jake snorted. "Really? All that fuss over a branch cracking? In the woods?" Yeah, I know, that's why I dropped it. It wasn't much." Chris and Luke exchanged a look, seeming to sense that wasn't quite it. But Jake was snickering at my foolishness and neither quite seemed like they wanted to press. We all went to bed after putting the fire out. I tossed and turned some, but overall the night passed on without incident. In the morning, we all woke up to the sound of Jake hollering that if we wanted to fish, now was the time before it got too hot. The lake was a blast. We sat around fishing for a while, chatting as the sun rose up in the sky. The fish were particularly hesitant to bite, but as Chris launched into a story, I found myself having a good time anyways. We scrambled some eggs we'd brought along in Jake's fancy cooler over the fire when we got too hungry. I considered asking him if bringing food in was cheating, but it wasn't worth the fight. At about noon, we started swimming. The water was nice and warm from the summer heat, and I spent a good chunk of time just floating and soaking up the sun. That, of course, was ruined when Luke snuck up on me underwater and grabbed me around the gut, flipping me over and giving me a nose full of lake water. We splashed around for a good long while. The thing that drove us back to the shore was our grumbling stomachs. Luke and I were chatting excitedly about finding some good sticks for roasting the hot dogs we'd brought along when I ran straight into Chris's back. "Whoa, Chris, dude, what's a..." I paused. Chris and Jake were just staring towards our campsite. I followed their gaze. Plastic littered the ground. All the meat we had brought with us had been torn out of its packages and was gone, leaving only the wrappers behind. Luke's tent, which had the marshmallows and chocolate, had its flap shredded. The flap was still zipped up closed, but the middle was gaping like an open wound. My blood ran cold. Luke had caught up and was looking as nervous as me. Even Jake looked shaken. "I mean, we are in bear territory," I tried to reason. "Guess we should have locked down the food a bit better." Jake looked pissed. "You think I didn't plan for that? No damn bears getting into these containers. I don't even know why they would. The meat's all packaged. They say bears are pretty smart. Maybe they..." Luke tried. "That cooler had a lock on it no bear could undo. It'd have to bust the damn thing open." Silence weighed heavily on us as we looked at the cooler. The nice, shiny, pristine cooler. "Maybe we should head back. I mean, we don't have any food left," Luke suggested nervously. I looked up at the sky. The sun was still relatively high, but it was rapidly sinking down. It'd be dark by the time we made it back to our cars. Then I looked over at Luke's tent. I stared at the shredded door, the carefully opened backpack. What was worse? Risking getting lost in the woods or risking staying? That wasn't a real choice, and I knew it. "Let's get our stuff packed up and let's go. We have our heavy-duty flashlights," I said. Chris and Luke didn't need any convincing. They hustled to get their tents taken down and their stuff ready. Jake looked hesitant. "I don't think leaving now is a good idea. He checked his watch. "Already 5:30. By the time we get back..." "It'll be dark, I know," I agreed. "But it's either that or staying here for another night." He huffed and started getting his stuff together. My tent came down easy enough and I had all my stuff packed quick. When I shrugged on my pack and turned to the other guys, I could see Jake stomping out the fire embers and grabbing his compass. "Everyone got their lights," he said, bad mood evident. Chris and Luke nodded, although Luke looked vaguely ill at the thought of navigating by flashlight. I wasn't faring much better. We all started back the way we came in. Jake took the lead following the trail markers. Luke followed close behind him. Chris and I took up the rear, keeping pace beside one another. "You think it was a bear?" he asked. I shrugged. "Dunno. Never actually had an encounter with one." "I have," he said. "Dad and I went camping when I was a kid. Family next to us on the grounds didn't properly store up their trash." "You saw it?" "Sure did. Black bear, ugly thing. Spawned a whole lecture from my dad about how to properly store food and trash so you don't attract them." He paused. "Not gonna lie to you, Matt. I don't think this was a bear." I waited for him to elaborate, but he just looked at the cooler Jake was carrying. "We followed all the safety precautions." "Not just that. We were pretty damn close to the shore. Splashing and running around, just lots of noise. Bears don't like noise." "Jake, what way do we go?" Luke called, interrupting our silent musing. I looked up from my feet, confused. The spray-painted red triangle was visible on the tree ahead of us. Jake paused. "What way do we—" He glanced around. I took the opportunity to do the same. Luke was practically bouncing from foot to foot in his eagerness to go. "Where's the other path go off to? Another part of the lake?" he asked, giving a nervous laugh. Jake wasn't laughing, though. In fact, he was turning an alarming shade of white. I could feel his sudden fear radiating off of him. I was starting to match it. Beyond the tree with our marker, I could distinctly see two paths marked in the same fashion. One veered off slightly to the left and the other veered off slightly to the right. The marker was dead center. We'd have to choose a path. "Jake, which one goes to our cars?" I asked. It was a testament to how stunned he was that he didn't tear me a new one over for questioning him. There'd only been one path coming up, and it was straight as an arrow. We hadn't even taken a little sidestep, had just marched straight through the woods. Neither of these paths went straight forward like we had when we came up. So what was this? A whole new split complete with a line of markers for a path that wouldn't take us back to our cars? "Jake, you and your family put these markers up, right? Which way do we go?" I asked, urgency creeping into my voice. I don't know," he said, his voice cracking. "We never really went out from the path. We definitely didn't mark a new path, and we wouldn't mark with the same damn markers." I looked up again. The sun had crept further down, painting the sky with a faint shade of orange. We were getting closer and closer to sunset. "Jake, are you sure we're going the right way?" Chris asked. I turned to see him and Luke huddled together behind us. "Yes, we go right. Ignore the damn markers on the left, we go right." "How do we know, though?" "I mean, those aren't the same markers we followed, right?" "There was only one path coming up," Chris nervously asked. Jake let out a frustrated huff. He slung his pack to the ground and walked over to a tree with some low-hanging branches. "I'll climb up here and find the clearing we parked near. That way we can ignore the damn markers and go to the road. Happy?" he snarled before grabbing the branch and beginning to climb. We watched him climb till about halfway up when the leaves began to obscure him. I could hear the branches rustling as he continued his climb. "Well," Chris hollered. "I see the road," Jake yelled back. We all let out a sigh of relief. "This whole trip has been a bit of a nightmare," I commented. Chris and Luke both nodded. I waited to hear the crackling of the branches as Jake climbed down. They never came. We waited there at the bottom for what felt like an eternity. "Jake? Buddy? You coming down from there?" Chris called. No answer. I frowned, trying to see through the thick canopy. Suddenly, I heard the sound of something hurtling through the branches. The crashing was fast, a free fall as whatever it was collided with everything in its path. I jumped back in time to avoid being knocked over the head with whatever it was that had fallen. I looked down. A hiking boot lay sideways on the ground, its ties unlaced. I looked back up into the canopy. The wind blew a little harder, shuffling the leaves just enough for me to see higher up the tree. Jake was gone. I blinked once, twice, before turning back to the others. Chris and Luke both were staring at the shoe. Luke had Chris's arm in a vice grip, his breathing beginning to speed up in a telltale sign of panic. Chris looked back up. "Jake, where the hell are you? This ain't funny." Still silent. We waited 5 minutes, then 10. The only noise around us was the wind rustling through the leaves and the sound of Luke getting more and more antsy. When 15 had passed, I turned to Chris. "Left or right?" He looked at me, startled. "What path?" "Left or right?" "Dude, what are you talking about? We can't leave Jake." "Jake's gone. I don't know how or why he seems to think it's funny to leave us here, scaring us half to death." I took a deep breath. "We gotta get back to our cars. Leave his pack there. When he wants to stop scaring the shit out of us, he can catch up." Chris paused for a long, tense moment before sighing. "Yeah, okay." He looked over at the two paths in front of us. "Look down the left and see if it looks familiar. I'll look down the right." I nodded and walked towards the left path. Chris and Luke began towards the right, looking down it to try and find some indication that was the right path. I walked to the first marker on the left. I couldn't understand why there were suddenly two paths. It didn't make any damn... I stilled. In front of me, a line of wet red had dripped down from the triangle. I watched it gleam, wet in the setting sun. This marker was new, and now that I was closer to it, I could smell the tang of copper. My heart seized in my chest, and I quickly cut across the paths to Chris and Luke, who were discussing their trail. They turned to me as I approached. "I think this might be it. Both sides of the tree are marked the same way it was when we..." "It's this one. The other..." I sucked in a ragged breath. "The other one's fresh." "Fresh? The hell you mean?" Chris started. I cut him off. It wasn't paint. The red is wet, it's fresh. Someone painted a new path with the same marker. That's so messed up. Why the hell would... Chris, it's not paint. Luke, who had been watching the exchange, cut in. "What do you mean it's not paint? What else would it..." I could see the moment it clicked for him. Chris, too, tensed in realization. "Is this some kind of joke? You and Jake?" he asked, voice dangerously low. I whirled on him, almost hissing in rage. "You think I'd plan something like this? With him of all people? The bastard can't even look at me without a comment on how shit I am at everything. The only reason he even lowered himself enough to pass me an invite is because he knew the two of you would want me to come along. And you think of what? Plan some scary, haunted trail." Even as I said it, I knew he didn't. Neither of them did. They both just wanted some rational explanation for all of this. I pushed past Chris to check the trail marker. I got close and checked it. My heart about stopped. It was wet. I turned back towards the clearing we were in before, charging across towards the markers we had been following. Wet, wet, wet. All tinged with a coppery smell we'd been marching by too quickly to notice. I turned back towards Chris and Luke and saw Chris was right behind me. "They're all wet?" he asked, wrinkling his nose as the smell hit him. We shared a glance, looking at the triangle nearest to us. Now what? I couldn't help but wonder. Here we were in a rapidly darkening forest, lost without anyone who was even slightly familiar with the area. "I've got a compass in my pack," Chris answered. He set his pack on the ground and rummaged through it for a while before triumphantly pulling out the instrument. "Jake had his on him when he went up that tree, but I have my own. He pointed in a direction off to our right. South is that way. We go that direction, we should get close to the road. As long as you and me and Luke stay close together, we'll be fine. I nodded and turned towards where Luke was. You hear that? We'll be fine. We just stick together and... Luke was gone. Nausea slammed into me, turning my limbs into goo. Chris wildly looked around, calling for Luke. I grabbed onto his sleeve, terrified. "Chris," I said, keeping my voice low. He stopped his frantic yelling and looked at me. "Chris, we need to get to the road and get back to our cars." "Matt, we can't just leave Luke here. Jake knows this place, but Luke..." "Chris." We get to the car and we go somewhere with signal and call the cops. They can come out here with dogs and search and rescue teams. But for right now, we have to go. I could see him internally fighting a battle, but in the end, he nodded. I kept a hold of his sleeve as he led us south. The woods finally got dark enough that I grabbed the flashlight with my free hand. Chris went to grab his too, but I stopped him. "I've got the light. You keep leading us straight." He didn't fight me. He just nodded and continued leading us. Finally, I could see something between the trees. The road. I could hear Chris give a little sigh of relief, and we both started walking a little faster. "Where's the other path go off to? Another part of the lake?" a voice called behind us. We stopped. Dread crawled up my spine as Luke's voice washed over me. Chris was about to turn and call when I let go of his arm and covered his mouth. He looked at me angry when the voice came again. "Jake, what way do we go?" I felt a whimper crawl up my throat. I met Chris's eyes and jerked my head in the direction of the road. He nodded. We crept forward, taking care to keep our steps as light as possible. Behind us, sounding like he was wandering the forest, Luke's voice continued. The nausea increased tenfold as I realized it was just repetitions of things he had said earlier. The road ahead of us was clearer than ever, and as if heaven itself was lighting the way, it was lit in a soft golden glow. Chris broke free of my grasp and ran forward. The crunching of leaves and sticks beneath him caused the voice to stop, and suddenly the sound of something barreling through the trees made its way to my ears. I sprinted after Chris, unwilling to turn and see what was behind us. We broke from the tree line, scared to death. The noise behind us didn't slow down. "Run across the road! Run!" I called, not even slightly slowing. I vaguely noticed that the light seemed to be getting brighter, but I ignored it in favor of sprinting harder. Chris cleared the road, and I was right behind him. I heard an odd noise, almost like brakes squealing. I spun around in time to see something big behind us get thrown forward across the road as a car slammed into it. My jaw dropped as everything seemed to come to a stop. The car was dented on the hood and its driver stumbled out, confused. I didn't hesitate. Neither did Chris. We ran up her, urging her back into the car. I think she caught sight of what it was she hit, because she just faintly told us to get in the back. We clambered in as she put the car in reverse and turned the car around. She started the car back towards town, and I couldn't help but stare out the back window. As the driver took a turn and the thing was going out of view, I saw it twitch and begin to rise up. The driver's name was Eve, and she was trying to head home from a work trip in another city. She'd been passing through by pure happenstance and was grilling us on what the hell that thing was. A deer, an elk, a moose. It's awful far down south for moose, but damn if that sucker wasn't big. I just asked her to drop us off at the police station. She looked back at us, confused, but said that was fine. I closed my eyes. When we got there, we told them the whole story. They obviously had some questions, and I knew they didn't believe us on multiple parts. They told us not to leave town and that they'll have some more questions for us later. They took us up in the morning to get our cars. When we got to the spot we'd parked, the cops looked just as baffled as Chris and I had felt this whole trip. Every window of all 4 cars was shattered. The tires were slashed with great big gashes, and the trunks had been ripped open by force. Luke's car even had a door ripped off its hinges, the offending piece of metal bent out of shape a few yards away. The cops just took us home. They never found Jake or Luke. Chris and I still keep in touch every now and again. I think that trip put a strain on our friendship. Eve and I, meanwhile, got a whole lot closer. So close, in fact, she's right here beside me as I type this. I don't know what's prompting me to recall this, maybe some form of exposure therapy or a way to get it off my chest. I'm not sure. All I know is that I'm never going camping again. Story 3 ends here. Now, listen closely to Story 4. I thought my daughter's imaginary friends were harmless. Until I met Mr. Long. It is currently 12:17 a.m. when I'm writing this. I have been awake for almost 24 hours straight because of my daughter's imaginary friend. I am afraid that if I try to sleep now, I might not wake up. I'm not being kept awake by anxiety or some nightmare. This is more disturbing. This is real. Fuck. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up a bit. I'll start from the beginning. My name is John, a single dad who does his best to provide for his small family. My wife died just over 4 years ago while giving birth to our only daughter, Emma. The hole she left has been almost too deep to fill. Some days I ask myself why I keep moving forward until I see my daughter's bright, smiling face. That makes it all worth it. We live in a modest one-story house in rural Oregon. It isn't much, but it keeps a roof over our heads, especially with my meager salary. As a struggling writer, that's about all I can ask for nowadays. About 2 weeks ago, something strange started happening. Or at least that's when I noticed it. It was a Tuesday. I had just arrived home from making a quick grocery run to the supermarket across the street. Emma is very mature for being 4 years old and doesn't mind too much when I have to run out for 5 minutes. We live in a pretty nice neighborhood anyway, so I'm not worried about anything happening, especially when I can see my house from the store windows. I put the groceries away, picked up the dirty clothes that lay strewn about on the floor, and then made my way into the kitchen. I tossed some Hot Pockets into the microwave, pretending it was a legitimate dinner, and then went to find Emma. I had to look around a little more than normal for her, which surprised me. She wasn't in the living room watching TV like usual. "Emma," I called out. "Emma, honey, where are you?" I walked down the hallway toward her bedroom, figuring maybe she got tired and went to take a nap. As I approached the door, the air got extremely cold. Even though the heat was on, it felt like a freezer door had been opened in her room, blowing a cold breeze into the hallway. As I approached the door, I could see that it was slightly cracked, only the slightest sliver of light pressing through. I grabbed the door handle, but before I could push it open, I heard a whisper. It was Emma's voice. It sounded like she was talking to someone. I quietly pushed the door open, trying not to disturb her. She was sitting on the floor next to her closet, leaning toward it as if she were whispering to someone inside. At first, I assumed she was just lost in her own little world, talking to an imaginary friend. Like most kids her age, she has a very active imagination. She has tea parties with her stuffed animals, draws monsters with googly eyes, and more often than not, pulls me in so she can practice her makeup skills. Chill. Figured this was just another one of her friends who was pretending to live in her closet. I stepped into the room and prepared to call her to dinner. Before I could get her name out of my mouth to grab her attention, she stopped whispering, listening for a response from the closet. She listened intently, pushing her ear against the door. This was new. It seemed harmless and yet disturbing. I stood watching, waiting to see the outcome. She nodded her head as if agreeing with the non-existent person behind the door before whispering back in response. This wasn't just childish banter. She was having a legitimate conversation. "Why don't you like the sunlight?" she asked, pausing and pushing her ear to the closet door. She waited a moment and then turned to whisper back, "Oh, that's sad." She paused a few seconds longer, grimacing with discontent. "Don't worry, I won't tell Daddy." A chill ran down my spine as she spoke that final sentence. The words she spoke were so unnerving. I had never heard her talk like that before. I knocked softly and stepped into the center of the room, interrupting her conversation. "Emma, honey? Who are you talking to?" I asked, trying to push what I heard out of my mind. The unsettled feeling left as quickly as it came. I chalked it up to just her active imagination. She turned to look at me and smiled hesitantly, like I had interrupted an important meeting. "Mr. Long," she said. I smiled and crouched down next to her. "Oh yeah? Is Mr. Long one of your friends who lives in the closet?" I asked, trying to rationalize it. "He's like Mr. Bear and Mr. Duck, right?" She looked at me like I was an idiot. Her face scrunched in confusion as she answered my question. "Number. He's too big to fit in there," she said matter-of-factly, as if I should have already known that. I admit something about the way she said that didn't sound playful or childish. It sounded so sincere, so haunting for some reason. Before I could respond, she continued to describe Mr. Long. "He's really tall, and he has long arms that touch the floor even when he stands up," she explained, now smiling again. "His fingers wiggle like spaghetti noodles and tickle my toes when I'm asleep." She giggled and looked up at me with a face full of such happiness that I almost couldn't perceive how disturbing her description was. "He lives in the wall with his friend. She's really nice," she said before scooting closer to the closet door. "What?" I thought to myself. There can't be another one. It was unsettling enough to think about an imaginary friend tickling my daughter's feet at night. But now he lives inside the walls with another girl? I looked down at her, holding a slight grin, hoping that it was no more than just her wild imagination. A few moments of silence followed, letting the thoughts sink further and further into my brain. She looked up at me, as if I understood. I smiled, holding my concern at bay. I wasn't so sure that I enjoyed hearing about Mr. Long and his friend in the wall, but kids have creepy imaginations. I figured it was just a phase and that it would pass. I gave her the "that's awesome, sweetheart" line I always used when she told me something I didn't understand before kissing her forehead and helping her to her feet. "All right, honey, it's time to eat," I said, pulling her away from the closet door. "I'm sure Mr. Long needs to eat too." She smiled, looking at me. "He doesn't eat," she said. "Mr. Long just likes to watch." I laughed it off, hugged her and picked her up to carry her to the dinner table. I tried not to think about the conversation, but something about it kept pressing its way back into my mind. It was strange. Her answers were so odd and somewhat disturbing. I ended up letting it go for the sake of her happiness and my sanity. That Thursday night was a rough one. I had been writing all day, straining my eyes so badly that my head screamed at me to stop. I finally closed the laptop and decided to relax on the couch for a bit to watch a documentary. I had put Emma to bed a couple of hours prior, making sure that she was settled in for the night. As a single dad, I always have a baby monitor on the coffee table just in case something happens. I know that she probably doesn't need it, but it makes me feel better to have it. I had fallen asleep on the couch when I heard it crackle to life. Usually it is filled with soft static or her steady breathing as she sleeps. This time, however, it was filled with whispers. I sat up straight and looked at my phone. It was 2:46 a.m. There was no reason for her to be awake at this hour. At first, I thought she was talking in her sleep. It was a stretch, being that she had never done that before, but I figured it was possible. I picked up the monitor and held it up to my ear. I could hear her voice speaking softly, followed by a pause. For the first couple of pauses, I couldn't hear anything. It was on the third or fourth pause when I heard another voice fill the silence. This one was definitely not Emma. It was low and raspy, not a child's voice. I turned up the volume thinking it was just a speaker anomaly. Not ready yet. Static. Soon. Be patient, the voice muttered. But I want to play now, Emma responded quickly. She said she wants me to come in. I had heard enough. I jumped up from the couch and rushed down the hall to her bedroom. The door was standing wide open. My concern level skyrocketed. I knew I had closed it when I put her to bed. I slowly peered around the door frame, scanning the entranceway to her room. Her nightlight was flickering like it was struggling to stay alive. Emma was lying on her side, thumb in her mouth, eyes half closed. All of her stuffed animals were lined up on the edge of her bed, facing the closet like they were an audience waiting for the show. I looked over to the closet door. It was slightly open, darkness covering every inch in an inky black curtain. "Emma," I whispered, stepping toward the bed. "Are you okay, honey?" She nodded without looking at me, still barely holding her eyes open. "The girl in the wall says that the dark feels good," she said sleepily. "She wants to come play." Her voice was flat. She wasn't scared, she was more dejected. I walked over to the closet and pulled the door open all the way. As the door swung open, knocking against the wall, I nervously scanned the darkness of the closet. Aside from her clothes, shoes, and a pink laundry basket, there was nothing of note inside. I couldn't physically see anything, but I could smell something. The inside of the closet smelled awful. It was sharp and repulsive, making me gag almost immediately. The best description I can give is that it smelled like a mix between wet earth and something sour, like spoiled milk or rotten meat. I slammed the closet door shut. An angry voice rose from behind me. "Daddy!" Concerned by the tone, I spun around to look at Emma. "Don't do that," Emma said, sitting straight up in bed, eyes now wide open and staring at me. "He doesn't like the door closed." That was the first time that I ever felt fear from something that my daughter said to me. It didn't make sense. This situation was so far from the norm that I could not mentally comprehend any of it. I tried to ask Emma about what happened, but she lay back down and acted like she was going to sleep. Every attempt to question her was met with her pulling away from me and groaning in discontent. I eventually gave up, thinking that the next day I would get to the bottom of this, no matter what I had to do. The next day I was met with a coldness from Emma. My intrusion into her conversation with her friend made her angry. I made her breakfast and put on her favorite cartoons before I sat down to write. She didn't say as many as 2 words to me the entire morning. The day ticked by like normal, only with more silence. I finished my work and formulated a plan for what I would do that night. I put Emma in a bath and went to my room to grab the tools for my plan. I had an old GoPro camera that I used when I rode dirt bikes. I figured it would be perfect for what I wanted to do. While she bathed, I set up the camera in her room. I used a blanket, along with a couple of shirts, to hide it on her dresser where she couldn't see it. I made sure to angle it so that I could see her bed and the closet all in one shot. I put her to bed, tucked her in, and kissed her goodnight. I pretended to adjust her bed's comforter, watching her movements. I was waiting to see if she would notice the camera. She never looked in its direction as she rolled over on her side and fell asleep right away. I walked out of her room and gently pulled the door closed. I hoped that the next day would reveal the answers to all of my questions. I waited until Emma came out to play in the living room the next morning before I went in to get the camera. As I walked into the room, the closet door was again open with the same wet, rotting smell emanating from it. I reviewed the footage on my laptop as she watched cartoons. Most of it was harmless. Mostly Emma tossing and turning in bed. I fast-forwarded the footage to a point that caught my eye. At 2:19 a.m., over about 2 seconds, her closet door slowly creaked open. From the darkness, a long black figure slithered into frame. The figure slid out of the closet like it didn't have bones, almost like a snake worming its way upright. It was tall and thin, with arms that slid across the floor as it moved. As the figure grew to its full length, the camera shook as if it were pushed or touched by something before going black. Shocked, I paused it and rewound. I watched over and over as the figure slithered from the darkness and stood over Emma, imposing its devious intentions. I wanted it to be a trick of the light, or maybe my mind playing tricks on me, but it wasn't. Every time I watched it, the same unsettling scene played out. It wasn't my imagination. Something dark and ominous was in the room with her that night. Something that calls itself Mr. Long. I knew I had to confront this thing. I wasn't ready, but I told myself I was. The human brain is a funny thing. You can almost trick yourself into thinking you're prepared to handle a situation like this until things go wrong. And I had watched enough horror movies to just about convince myself of that. But when you're sitting outside your daughter's room at 2:38 a.m. holding a kitchen knife, things are already not quite going as planned. All of my reasoning had drifted away like dust in the breeze. When you think your child is in danger, nothing else really matters anymore except making sure they're safe. I sat outside Emma's room on a creaky old chair that I pulled out of the garage. I figured if I was going to try to see this thing, I might as well be close and ready. The lights were off, bathing everything in darkness, including me. The only bit of light was a faint glow from her princess nightlight that spilled under the door. She'd been quiet all night. I could hear her soft breathing through the door, but she never moved. When Emma slept, she always tossed and turned, a trait she picked up from her mother. But tonight it was different. She wasn't moving, whispering, or anything else for that matter. I stared at the door, waiting to hear that thing open the closet door. At exactly 2:59, the silence was broken. It wasn't a voice, just a low, wet sound, like someone dragging a mop across a tile floor. Heavy, slow drags moved from the closet to the middle of the room. Shh, shh, shh. They kept moving until they reached the edge of Emma's bed, then stopped. I heard Emma's voice pick up, but not in a whisper this time. She was speaking out loud in a strange rhythmic tone. It sounded like she was chanting, "1 for the wall, 2 for the floor, Mr. Long is at the door." I stood up quickly, tipping the chair over. I reached for the doorknob, squeezing it in my hand. It was ice cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer for hours. My hand hesitated momentarily, allowing enough time to pass for me to hear what came next through the door. Something else was speaking. It sounded softer, calmer than what I had heard before. The voice slid under the door like noxious smoke, squirming into my ears and sending a chill down my spine. "Not yet, Father," it said. "She isn't finished." I grasped the handle harder and pushed, flinging the door open. I crashed through the door and into Emma's room. I was met with an oppressive, dark silence. It was all wrong. I had just heard someone or something in here talking to her. The nightlight flickered like a dying candle in the darkness. Long shadows bent around the corners, curving upwards, clinging to the walls. Emma was sitting upright in bed, eyes closed, rocking slowly back and forth. All of her stuffed animals were in a circle around her now, facing outward like they were guarding her. The closet door stood wide open. I shifted my gaze down to the floor where I had heard the wet, sloshing sounds. There I saw what looked like a hand attached to an impossibly long arm squirming into the darkness. It quickly slid back into the closet, pulling the door closed with it. It was long and gangly, and its fingers wrapping around the door frame like slinking tendrils as the door slammed shut. I stepped inside, still clutching the knife in my now shaking hand. "Emma," I whispered, crossing the room. "Honey, wake up." She didn't respond to me, but continued to chant the same rhyme, continually getting softer until it transformed into what sounded like a lullaby. 3 for the girl, 4 for the... "Emma," I said sharply, shaking her, desperately trying to wake her. Instead, she stopped rocking, turned her head toward me, and whispered, "He said not to open my eyes, Daddy." My throat went dry. I held her right in front of me, and yet she felt so far away. She began humming the chant softly, repeating the same rhythm as one of the floorboards creaked behind me. The creaking turned into a deep groan as something heavy pushed its way onto the wooden floor. I could feel a dark presence wrap around me. I turned to face it, expecting the worst. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see nothing but the closet door, which was now opening slowly. The sickening smell of rot punched my nose as the door swung open. I raised the knife and stepped toward it. My heartbeat thudded faster and faster with each step I took. "I'm not scared of you," I said aloud as Emma continued to hum behind me. "You will not harm my daughter." I was shaking, trying not to show how much it scared me. A whisper rattled its way out from the deep, intense blackness. "You should be." The door slammed shut violently, shaking Emma out of her trance. She screamed, falling back into bed as the walls rattled from the impact. I dropped to my knees, the knife clattering to the floor. I hurriedly crawled over to Emma's bed to comfort her. She was in a panic, sobbing hysterically. My hand reached her leg, then her arm. I pulled her into my chest and hugged her tightly. "Daddy, don't look!" she screamed. "Don't look! Don't look!" I continued to hold her tight, both of our hearts pounding as if they were racing one another. "Shh, shh, shh. It's okay, sweetheart," I assured her. "Daddy's here." As I tried to comfort her, Emma started to shake. She kept repeating something under her breath that I couldn't make out. I pulled her away from my chest so I could hear her. "Almost there. Almost there. Almost there," she muttered, repeating it over and over. Suddenly, I heard the door behind me hit the wall. I turned, still holding Emma in my arms, and looked toward the closet. A pale blue glow emanated from it, like moonlight through dense fog. As I stared into the gentle blue light, something black slid out of it and into Emma's room. Something large began revealing itself little by little until it finally cleared the doorway. It unfurled its body into the room like a balloon inflating, filling the entire space. Its arms were incredibly long. So long they coiled at the wrists like rope onto the floor, draping its fingers around them. They spread across the floorboards, cutting deep marks into the wood. I instinctively looked up toward where its face should have been. Its features were almost inconceivable. My brain scrambled to create a face that wasn't there to begin with. It took one slow step forward, revealing itself further. I could now see 2 small black eyes and a large mouth spread across its face. It took another step and knelt, folding in on itself like a puppet whose strings had just been cut. It slowly lowered until it was eye level with Emma and me. "She is ready. You must go now," it said, unwrapping one of its spindly fingers and pointing to the closet. I sat Emma on the floor and stepped in front of her, putting myself between the two of them. I leaned down, picking up the knife, and raised it toward the creature. "If you touch her, I swear to God I'll fucking kill you," I said sternly, voice cracking slightly. It raised a finger to its thin, waxen lips. "Shh! Do not interfere, Father," it said. The knife shook in my hand. Suddenly, as if a magnet were pulling it, it was jerked out of my hand and sent flying across the room, burying itself in the drywall. I barely had time to register the movement before the creature scurried up to me, fingers writhing like demented vines. It smiled at me as if it knew I couldn't hurt it. Dark green fluid ran down its featureless face, collecting on its arms. "Soon," it said, its face now inches from mine. All of a sudden, it collapsed in on itself and rolled back into the closet like an old rug. The blue light vanished into the blackness, and the door slammed shut, leaving silence in its place. Emma fell limply onto the floor, unconscious. I turned around quickly and scooped her up. I sat on her bed, holding her in my arms and rocking her back and forth, never letting my eyes move away from the closet door. I eventually brought her into my room and laid her in my bed for the rest of the night. I grabbed my laptop, typing out what happened while she slept. I stayed in the same spot with her until sunrise, afraid to let my guard down again. I've been awake since then, recording everything that has happened. I woke up Emma this morning around 7 to ask her if she remembered anything from last night. She says she doesn't, only that she remembers having a weird dream. When I asked her what it was about, she said, "I had a dream about being in a forest with a tall tree man. He was funny." She smiled when she said it. She may have thought he was funny, but I didn't. I hadn't been to sleep yet. As soon as she woke up and I knew she was okay, I grabbed my laptop to get everything I had witnessed typed out. In the back of my sleep-deprived mind, it occurred to me that this could also be used as evidence if something terrible were to happen to me. I used the entire day to type all of this out. I put Emma in my bed a while ago now. After I tucked her in, I went to take a look inside her closet and noticed something strange. There was something carved inside her closet. In the panel between the doorframe and the wall was the word, "Soon." I am so lost for words with it, I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to tear down that wall inside the closet tomorrow and see what's inside. There's got to be something back there. I will write when I can. I've been trying to figure out the right way to say this and to explain what I did. I found something. This is going to sound insane, but I believe there is a body inside the rear wall of my daughter's closet. And I'm starting to think this Mr. Long character is the one responsible for it. It started this morning when I decided to investigate the closet. I didn't think I could write anything worth a damn today, even if I wanted to. So I took the day off and kept Emma occupied with cartoons. I needed time to find out more. I used it to do a little digging into the wall. I grabbed a hammer from the garage and went to work. The stench was awful. I had to wear a nose plug the entire time so I didn't puke. I had pulled a good chunk of the wall apart when I noticed something white and smooth tucked between two studs in the closet. I peeled the drywall away, pushing my finger into the cavity. It was long and round with what felt like a ball at the end of it. Realizing what it was that I was feeling, I jumped back, dropping the hammer to the floor. Again, my mind would not let me comprehend what I was seeing. I tried telling myself that it was something else, but I had just uncovered a human bone inside my daughter's closet. I didn't push any further. I grabbed the chunk of drywall and pressed it back into the hole, covering the gruesome find. The only thing I could think of doing was to ask Emma about this girl in the wall she had been talking about. I know she's just a kid, but sadly, she knows more about this than I do. She was coloring at the table as I walked into the kitchen. I sat down next to her, fearing the task in front of me. I asked a question that I never thought I would have to ask my daughter. "Hey, Emma, this girl in the wall you were talking about, what's her name?" She stopped coloring, staring blankly at the paper, like she was looking through it. "She doesn't remember," she said, almost tearing up. "That's why she's sad. She wants a friend." I leaned in and put my arm around her, trying my best not to press her too hard. "Did she tell you that?" I asked. She shook her head. "Mr. Long told me. He says she wants me to be there with her." "What does that mean, baby?" I asked, my voice filling with concern. With that question, she finally looked up at me. Her eyes filled with tears as she answered. She used to live here, but her daddy didn't love her. She said with tears dripping down her cheeks. So Mr. Long took her away to stay with him. She looked back at the paper, sniffling and wiping her face with her sleeve. You love me, don't you, Daddy? She asked. You won't make Mr. Long take me, will you? I was shocked. Every synapse in my brain was firing in protection mode. The fact that she asked me that question made me feel like I had failed as a father. I couldn't stand the idea that she even remotely felt like I didn't love her. Of course I do, sweetheart, I said in a calming yet firm tone. You know I love you, and I would never send you away. Don't think about that anymore, baby. I pulled her toward me, wrapping my arms around her as she bawled against my chest. I don't know what it is about the way kids say things, but their words are always so eerie. The calmness in Emma's voice and how she spoke unnerved me, filling me with fear and dread like I've never felt before. Later, after I put Emma down for a nap, I opened the closet door to investigate further. I pulled everything out of it. Clothes, shoes, all of it. I stepped inside and pressed my ear to the drywall, right above the spot I had opened up with the hammer. I could hear the faint sound of water flowing through the pipes in the wall, but nothing unusual. Not knowing what else to do, I tried knocking. I guess I foolishly thought that someone would respond. It wouldn't be the creepiest thing I'd heard if they had. I paused for a moment and knocked again, but this time in a pattern. I didn't plan it, but my fist involuntarily rapped against the wall in a strange rhythm. Knock, 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 knock. My hand rested against the wall when suddenly I felt a vibration flow through the wooden studs and into my fist. It was the same knock, this time coming from the other side. I stumbled back, almost tipping the lamp over. My heart thudded in my chest, causing a wave of nausea to wash over me. The putrid odor of the closet, followed by the phantom knocks, sent me into a sickening spiral of fear and confusion. I ran to the garage and grabbed a sledgehammer. I needed to unveil whatever was inside that wall. I stomped back into the bedroom, angrily throwing the sledgehammer above my head, prepared to bring it down violently. As the hammer reached its apex, a female child's voice swirled inside my head, distorted and raspy. Don't do it, Daddy, it whispered, pleading with me. I stalled for a moment, but the voice didn't deter me. I brought the hammer down against the wall with a loud crash, sending dust and splintered wood flying into the air. Piece by piece, I peeled the wall away. The first few fell away easily, breaking into old paint and chalk dust. Yet as I pushed further, it became tougher, like something behind it didn't want to be found. I kept pushing through until the rest had been cleared. After an hour, I had fully uncovered the hole that I had previously broken apart, plus another 3-foot area around it. To my horror, what I had found inside the wall from before was definitely a bone. By the looks of it, it was an arm bone from a very small person. I continued uncovering more pieces of bone until I had unveiled a full human skeleton of what looked to be a child. Everything inside me screamed to stop and call the cops, but for some reason I couldn't. It was like something had taken hold of me, commanding me to push further. The hammer slammed into the wall again and again, simulating the battle going on inside my mind. One side of me was screaming, "Oh, stop now! Call the cops," while the other side screamed, "Keep digging, don't stop." I involuntarily swung the hammer, knocking more pieces away until I had uncovered not only the child's body but also a small hole next to it. The hammer buried itself into the wall, finally relinquishing its control over me. I collapsed to the floor in exhaustion, breathing heavily. I lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, trying to catch my breath. The voice in my head had gone silent. All I could hear now was the thundering beat of my heart in my ears. I gathered my thoughts and pulled myself upright, now sitting facing the closet. I studied the macabre scene, scanning every detail. The child's skeleton was in a fetal position, as if they had been pressed into the wall with force. I noticed that the lower leg bones were fractured in several places, as if they had been broken previously when this child was alive. The fragments from the leg bones filled the space between the studs, covering the floor and mixing in with the dust and debris. Next to them in the hole I had uncovered lay a small stuffed rabbit with the words, "Mr. Long," scribbled across its stomach in black ink. I pulled myself to my feet and shuffled closer, fearful of what I had just found. I could see deep scratches on the floorboards under the stuffed rabbit. As I reached down to move it aside, a nail rolled out from beneath it, coming to rest in a groove one of the scratches had formed. Following the lines, the scratch oddly looked like an H. Looking closer, I could see that more scratches met this one. Standing upright, I had revealed the hidden message. There on the floor were words scrawled into the wood in jagged, misshapen letters that read, "Help me." I felt a strong sadness grip me. It felt like I was reliving the day that my wife died, with no understanding as to why. I sat back on my heels, staring at the crude carvings, when I heard a soft voice rise from behind me. "Daddy, what are you doing?" My eyes widened, and fear shot through my chest as I jerked my head around to look at the door. There Emma stood, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. I jumped up, swirling on my feet, and scrambled to the door. I pulled her into my arms, trying to shield her eyes from the closet. "Nothing, honey," I lied. "Everything is fine." I felt like scum of the fucking earth lying to my daughter like that, but I had to for her protection, for her innocence. I picked her up in my arms and carried her back into the living room, but not without question. "Daddy, why were you in my closet?" she asked. "And why are you covered in white dust?" I didn't answer at first, not until she asked the next question. "Were you trying to kill Mr. Long?" I smiled at her, knowing in my mind that she was a lot more observant than I gave her credit for. She knew what I was doing, if only just an inkling of it. I sat her on the couch and slumped down next to her. I tried to gather my words, knowing I needed to figure out how to say this correctly and in a way she would understand. "Well, sweetheart, I was in your closet because Mr. Long asked me to help him with your friend in the wall," I told her, searching her eyes for acceptance. "So that's what I did." As soon as I heard the words come out of my mouth, I knew she wouldn't believe them. I was going to have to tell her the truth one way or another. The fact that I was talking to my daughter about a girl in the wall was crazy enough. But the idea that there was a real human skeleton inside the wall of her closet was even crazier. Emma and I talked for about an hour about why I had done what I did. She seemed to accept the fact that it was because I was trying to help her friend, so she let it go for the time being. I called the cops once she settled down for the evening. I know I should have called them a lot sooner, but I just couldn't for some reason. A detective came by around 6 p.m. this evening to ask me a few questions. His name was Detective Lawson. He was polite but visibly tired, carrying a coffee cup in one hand and a notepad in the other. He looked like the type of man who didn't scare too easily. I told him about the voices I heard and about this Mr. Long character. It wasn't until I mentioned the girl in the wall that his face turned from tired and angry to concerned and intrigued. I showed him the wall with all its gruesome contents. I could tell by his demeanor that this wasn't his first encounter with something like this. We talked about Emma's imaginary friends and how it all led to this as we waited for his team. He didn't laugh at me, nor did he question my sanity, which I had fully expected him to. He just nodded and took photos, being careful to capture every inch of the scene. The rest of the crime scene unit showed up about 10 minutes later, cordoning off Emma's room. I held and comforted her the entire time as they brought in their equipment. Detective Lawson nudged me and gestured with his head toward the kitchen. I knew he had a lot of questions. I sat Emma down at the kitchen table and walked over to the countertop to meet him. "You bought this place about 4 years ago, correct?" he asked, glancing around the room. "Yeah," I answered. "After my wife passed." He scribbled something down on his notepad, making sure not to reveal it to me. He furrowed his brow and looked up. "Did you ever meet the previous family?" he asked. "And does the name Lucy mean anything to you?" I had only lived in Oregon for 4 years. My wife and I moved here to get away from the city, but we never really got that close to anybody before she died. Definitely not any Lucy that I could remember. "No," I answered. "Should I have?" He flipped his notepad shut and pursed his lips like he was about to deliver bad news. "Well, they lived in this house about 10 years ago," he said, his face curling into something more somber. "Single dad and his daughter. Just like you. The girl went missing in 2017, about 2 years after they moved in." He removed his hat, placing it down on the counter. He leaned forward and pressed his elbows down, taking the weight off his feet. There were no signs of forced entry, or no leads. The case went cold, he said, staring blankly into the refrigerator door. The father disappeared about a month later at the peak of the search. Those words sent a waterfall of adrenaline coursing through my veins. It felt like electricity was flowing through my body. I leaned against the counter next to the detective, who now looked more tired than before. "So, they think is that girl in?" I asked, tripping over my words, trying not to say what I was actually thinking with Emma still nearby. Lawson shrugged, shaking his head as he looked back up at me. "Don't know," he answered. "He ran off. We've been looking for him ever since. And as for your other question, testing will tell for sure, but I can pretty firmly say yes at this point." His words felt like weights that hung on my shoulders. I didn't want this. Any of this. I just wanted a nice life for me and my daughter, and now I am caught up in a murder investigation. I stood in silence for a few moments, listening to the distant chatter of the investigators bumping and banging around in Emma's closet. Detective Lawson stood up straight, putting his hat back on and straightening it. "Your daughter might be seeing things she doesn't understand, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing there," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "Kids are sensitive. They can see things that we can't sometimes." He patted me on the shoulder and then walked toward the bedroom to help the other investigators. I was stunned. I had lived in this house for over 4 years and never once had an inclination or thought that there may have been something terrible hidden in the walls. Come to think of it, I guess that's why I was able to afford it, honestly. I looked over at Emma, who was coloring at the kitchen table. She was swinging her legs and humming as she scribbled on the pages as if in her own little world. I walked over to her and knelt at her level. "You okay, honey?" I asked, trying to gauge how she truly felt. She stopped coloring and looked up at me. "I'm okay, Daddy," she said with a smile. "She wants me to tell you that she's happy you found her. She didn't like playing with Mr. Long anymore." My mouth fell open in shock. I must have looked like a moron in front of Emma. She kept smiling at me like I was supposed to be happy about it. But all I felt was confusion and a curling sadness in my soul. She smiled and continued coloring, nodding and humming like nothing had happened. I shook my head slightly, blinking a few times, gathering my composure to respond to her. "Well, honey, tell her that I said she is very welcome," I responded, barely holding back tears. I stood up and walked into the next room just far enough so that Emma couldn't see or hear me. I pushed my back against the wall and fell to the floor. The emotions overcame me as I began to cry. I did my best to be quiet as the tears flowed down my cheeks and onto my shirt, Now that I knew the truth about what I had found, it broke me. It's all too much for me to handle. That man could have been me, and the girl in the wall could have been Emma. I sat and cried for what felt like an hour when I was interrupted by a deep voice above me. "Ahem, John?" they asked. I quickly scrambled to my feet, wiping my face with my sleeve. "Yes, sorry, I was just..." "It's okay, I get it," Detective Lawson replied. "We are finishing up here for the night. We are going to put you and your daughter up in a hotel for a few days so we can sort this out." He turned to look at where Emma sat in the kitchen and then turned back to me. "John, that little girl is going to need you right now," he said firmly. "I know this is hard, but you need to be there for her. I know you know that." I nodded back in agreement, even though I knew Emma was fully aware of the situation. I shook the detective's hand as he and the investigation team made their way out of the house. "I'll wait for you to get packed. Take your time," he said as he turned and made his way toward his car. I came back into the house and started getting things together. I told Emma we were going on a trip, which got her really excited. I packed all of her essentials along with everything I thought we would need for a few days. I grabbed some clothes along with my laptop and threw them in my suitcase. I loaded my old Toyota sedan and secured Emma in her car seat. I climbed in and made the 20-mile journey down to the Twin Pines Hotel off of Route 39 in Maxburg with Detective Lawson following close behind me. We arrived at the hotel and got checked in for our stay. Detective Lawson took care of the cost for us to stay for 3 days. I've never had a great relationship with law enforcement, but Detective Lawson is the best I've ever met. "You take care of yourself and that girl now, understand?" he said, smiling slightly. "Yes, sir, I intend to. Please keep me updated," I responded, trying not to sound as scared and tired as I actually was. He shook my hand and nodded in agreement before shooting a quick wink at Emma. He retreated to his car and disappeared into the dense fog, headed back into the fray. I got the key and opened up the room, finding places to arrange all of our things. 3 days was not a long time, but it wasn't that short either. I didn't want to be staying on somebody else's dime for longer than I had to. I pulled out my laptop and started writing as soon as we got settled in, transcribing everything that had happened to us in the last 24 hours. We arrived about an hour ago, allowing me to gather my thoughts and get everything typed out here. I got Emma tucked in for the night. She didn't seem to have any issues getting to sleep, even in a strange hotel room like this. Now I'm just sitting here on this decrepit floral print mattress, and the only thing I can think of is that girl in the wall. I know that I did the right thing by calling the police, but something inside me is telling me I shouldn't have. I don't know. I know that sounds strange. Maybe I'm just tired. Emma has been asleep for a while now. I think I'll join her. Story 4 ends here, and now we enter the fog of Story 5. My daughter is missing in Whitehall National Park. My daughter went missing a week ago. No one seems to have noticed. They look at this thing like it's my daughter, but I know better. I was there when whatever wanted her took her away, replaced her. My husband and I have been going through a rough patch since the beginning of this year. Small things were building to be larger arguments until we didn't want to be around each other day to day. Separation was looming, but we were doing everything in our power to keep that at bay. One random evening, after a long argument, I felt a call to our garage. While sorting through totes full of dead air and stored away winter clothes, I found a tote full of our summer memories from when our daughter was 5 years old. We had been happy then. Arguments were non-existent in our home. There seemed to be too much warmth there for them to cultivate. We would plan fun dinners and even more joyful outings. It felt like it was ages ago when in reality it was just a few years past. While flipping through the stacks of albums and drawings from our daughter, I found a feather. It looked to be a hawk feather, or something closely related, but larger and freckled with deep black spots. My husband had found it while we were camping at Whitehall National Park. It had been laying on our camping gear when we had awoken one morning. He packed it away carefully as a memento from one of our many camping trips. We had done research on it when we had gotten home, but had never been able to place the bird it fell off of. I brought it into our dining room, laying it on the kitchen table while I prepared dinner. Later on, we sat together with masks of a happy family on our faces for our daughter while eating our chicken and broccoli amalgamation. My husband had been absent-mindedly staring at the feather while eating, before he announced that we should go camping again like we used to. The excited gaggle of incomprehensible words our daughter let out was enough for me to agree, even if I did not feel up to being feasted on by deer flies that weekend. Her excitement could light up a room it was hard to say no. Before we knew it, it was Friday and we were packed and heading to Whitehall. Our daughter's excitement had gotten to us. We were becoming more and more keen on the trip as we got closer. Maybe this would be the thing that brought us back together. We found a spot near the Whitehall River, a spot that was sought after but surprisingly void of campers when we arrived. It was private, much deeper into the forest than the other campsites. We set up our area and then traversed the trails looking for dried sticks to build our fire. Our daughter took off ahead of us, wanting to lead the way on our small adventure. My husband lightly grabbed my hand, leaving room for me to remove it, but instead I grasped it as we walked. It felt right. Soon enough, we had enough sticks to start a fire, so we headed back to our campsite, our daughter once again leading the way. She had found a feather exactly like the one we found in the past. She was waving it in front of her like a conductor as we walked. We sat together around our small fire while our daughter asked us 1,000,001 questions about how grass got its color, or how the stars sat so close together, or if trees could feel love, and with each question we answered as well as we could. She started to zone off as the fire got warmer and the night got darker, and soon enough she was sleeping in her small camp chair. We carried her off to our tent and came back out to talk and watch the fire crackle some more. I never felt myself fall asleep, but I did feel my husband shaking me awake. "Violet isn't in the tent," is the thing that knocked me out of my tired stupor. I followed behind him to check as if he would ever make up such a gross joke. I only really believed him when I laid eyes on her disheveled sleeping bag. Immediately we started yelling her name, getting louder and louder as we heard no answer back. My mind kept telling me she'd be around this corner or she would be in this pile of drying brush, but each time there would be no sign of her. There were no footprints or scuffles in the dirt. The sun was still deep in the mountains. It wouldn't be light out for hours, and our girl was deeply afraid of the dark. She would never leave our campsite, at least not of her own volition, but there were no signs of someone struggling to take her away. She was a smart one. She'd never just follow someone deep into the forest without waking us. My husband decided to head to the front of the park to get the rangers. He kept trying to call their emergency number, but the lack of cell service kept rearing its ugly head. He took off in our small SUV as fast as he could, leaving me alone to scream and search for her. Soon enough, the screaming became pleading, begging the forest to bend until I could see her and know she's safe. While searching, I found myself going deeper into the brush, not really caring at this point if I got lost with her. I found myself in a small clearing. It felt like it was perfectly shaped into place in this forest, even though no logging or cutting was allowed here. Sitting in the middle of the clearing, I could see a small, hunched form. Their back was arched, unnaturally deep in its bend, with an oddly shaped shirt covering the bottom half, and their long, dark hair was hiding their face from view. Rushing over, I was sure it was my daughter, my Violet, but once I reached her, my mind could not catch up with what I was seeing. There aren't really any words to describe what was happening before me. The hunched form was holding its ankles, its face hidden between its knees, while small, muffled whines came from it. Its hair was shortening itself, the follicles eating at the length and pulling it back into its roots. The part of its spine that I could see was shaping, itself forming and cutting against the papery skin along its back until it joined the arch of the person hunched with it, popping itself into place when it found the bend it wanted. It sounded awful, painful, and so loud in this open space. What I thought was a shirt was actually feathers molting and popping themselves off the thing's back, leaving white pockmarked pale skin in its place. The holes pulled themselves closed, sinew reaching across the space until only skin was left. It heard me come upon it. I could see it try to pick its head up from its spot to look at me, but their rigid neck kept their head in place until it was done doing what was needed. My mind told me to run away, but my feet kept me firmly in place. The only thing I could do was witness this transformation. I'm not really sure what else to call it. Once the spine had found its home, their legs began forming, cracking in and out of place in a painful show. The form finally pulled its head away in what seemed to be agony, but there wasn't really any way to tell. Its mouth hadn't formed yet. When it moved its head back, seemingly to wail, there were only eyes, one much bigger than the other. The rest of its face was moving. Its cheekbones would push out and then pull themselves down the pale, unmarked skin and then back into place under their eyes. Their lower lash line would reach down so deep into their face, over the moving cheekbones and away from the raw red of their sclera, before making its way back to where it liked. Their legs kept cracking, lengthening and shortening themselves, almost unable to find the right place until the soft tissue of their knee rippled and kept the bone where it wanted it. I never saw the mouth form. Their legs kept my full attention until I heard a guttural gasp enter the space around us. Looking up, trailing my eyes across moving skin and tissue connecting, my eyes found the creature's mouth. It was open in a mimicry of a cry, but it just couldn't take that shape yet. Or it didn't know how to. Finally, the lips found their shape, broken and plastered across a deeply white face and too close to their eyes to make sense. The gums inside started to bleed heavily, leaving rivers down the sides of its cheeks, until one by one pockets opened up to push rounded teeth out. This seemed to be the most painful part for the writhing thing, its scream finding its way out of its throat and into the clearing. The noise pushed me out of my frozen daze. A primal part ticked away at my very cells until I threw my body to run back to the cleaning opening. I turned myself away, falling when my feet couldn't catch up with my mind. Pushing myself up, I didn't look back as I started to make my way in any direction that was away from that thing, until I heard it try to say something so familiar it stopped me almost dead in my tracks. Unmistakably, and in a voice I've heard since my daughter could speak, the thing pushed out the words, "Mum, mum." I looked around, hoping to see signs of my husband or a sign of anything that belonged in the world I knew before seeing this thing. My eyes found the only shape of a person in the tree line. My Violet. She was standing there next to something unimaginably tall, crooking itself down so it could reach her hand better. She looked terrified. I screamed out her name, but it was as if she couldn't see or hear me. She was staring at the monstrous form behind me, watching it take its shape. I threw myself in her direction, leaving the squirming thing behind me. As I was getting closer, the form holding her took a step back into the reaching dark, the black seeping around them like a mist, taking my unwilling daughter with it. She fought to get away, but the form had no issue pulling her along. Finally, I had made it to the trees she was in the middle of, the dark seeping away, leaving only the forest. While searching for any sign of her, something grabbed me from behind and pulled me back into the clearing. I started clawing and pushing away until my husband's face came into view. terrified, but with a sheen of relief plastered across it. As I was about to tell him everything that I had seen, my eyes looked past him and saw the Rangers wrapping a blanket around a small girl in the middle of the cleaning. My daughter's eyes were staring back at me. That thing had found its shape finally. That shape was my sweet girl, Violet. The scream that released from me was unbidden. I started to push myself away from him once again, the relief changing into terror as I fought to get away. I learned later an EMT had joined the Rangers with my husband and administered a sedative to me. They all thought the panic had caused me to go into some sort of episode. How do I tell them the thing sitting in the ambulance with us isn't my daughter? That my daughter was still out there in the dark forest? I tried to tell my husband, whispering to him what happened in case the thing could hear, but he just seemed to get more incredulous as I spoke. How could he believe me when the thing sitting 2 feet away looked so much like her? It talked like her, joked like her, questioned the EMTs exactly like my daughter would. I started to believe that maybe I made the whole thing up until we got home. Small things weren't right. This Violet hated foods my daughter adored. She didn't have certain scars my daughter had, or they were misshapen and slightly above their original spot. Her freckles were darker and sat higher on her cheeks than they used to. My husband would stare at her sometimes. Her mannerisms made her seem like a stranger at moments. It felt like he was starting to realize she wasn't right. But then she'd do something unmistakably Violet, and he'd laugh it off and go back to his normal routine. This thing was not my daughter, and I was the only one who knew or cared. Even, the thing didn't seem to understand it. It would spend its day acting as Violet did. It would go to school, come home, and eat dinner with us, ask us to read stories, and stay up late to watch SpongeBob on TV. Sometimes I would find it staring off, either out the windows or into space, as if it was entranced. It would feel me watching and shake itself out of its stupor and ask me a question only Violet could come up with. A few days after it all happened, I couldn't take it anymore. I left late in the night and found myself driving back to Whitehall. I was the only one who knew she was still out there, alone and scared. I had to find her, even if it meant I got lost in the deep black forest with her. I searched for hours until it became light, and until the light turned into a humid burn from the sun. My husband found me at the trailhead, sweaty and dirty, almost 11 hours after I had left. He had used a Find My iPhone feature to see where I was. He held me as I sobbed. While he thought of how he was losing his wife to insanity, all I could think about is how we lost our baby to a feathered thing in the forest. Story 5 ends here now. Settle in for story 6. I passed the monkey house twice. On the second pass, something was waiting. Have you ever wondered why animals stare at nothing for hours? Why do some zoos never open past sunset? Or why sometimes a child's laughter echoes through an empty enclosure? No? Then maybe you've never worked the night shift at Grizzly Falls Wildlife Park, but I have, and I wish I hadn't. It started out simple. I was broke, dead broke. Bills were clawing at my heels like rabid dogs, and jobs in my tiny town were about as rare as summer sun. So when I spotted a listing for an overnight security guard at the local zoo, I took it without blinking. The idea didn't seem half bad. Quiet paths, the moon overhead, and maybe the distant howl of a wolf if I was lucky. It even sounded peaceful. That illusion lasted about as long as the interview. A man named Mr. Halverson met me at the staff gate. He looked like sleep was just a rumor he'd heard about once. Gaunt eyes, jittery hands. He handed me a key card and a packet of papers with a single sentence. Read the rules. Follow them exactly, especially the ones about the enclosures. I should have walked. That should have been my cue to run fast and far. But desperation is a hell of a blindfold. At home, I read through the packet. Most of it was boilerplate. Lock the gates, make hourly rounds, radio in if anything seemed off. But then I flipped to the last page. It was printed in bold red type. Night shift protocols, do not ignore. There were 7 rules, 7, each more unhinged than the last. Do not enter the reptile house after 2:17 a.m. The door will be unlocked, but you must not go inside. If you hear whistling near the aviary between 1 and 2 a.m., do not investigate. Walk away. Do not turn around. At 3:03 a.m. exactly, check the polar bear enclosure. If the water is frozen, leave it. If it's thawed, press the red button near the window. Do not press it at any other time. If you see a child near the penguin exhibit, do not speak to them. They are not lost. Keep walking. Pass the monkey house twice. On the second pass, do not look inside. If your name is whispered over the intercom, do not answer. Find the nearest break room. Wait exactly 6 minutes. At 4:44 a.m., check the maintenance shed. If the light is on, turn it off. Lock the door from the outside. Do not open it again, for any reason. I laughed when I first read the rules. Not out loud, just a dry, nervous chuckle in the back of my throat. The kind of laugh you force when you're trying not to admit you're unsettled. It felt like a joke, a creepy initiation ritual, or maybe just something the staff did to mess with the new guy. I even texted my buddy Matt. He'd worked at Grizzly Falls a few years back before quitting out of the blue. You ever see this crazy list of night shift rules? I wrote, attaching a picture. He replied a minute later. No emoji, no punctuation, just 4 words. Don't take that job. I kept the paper, folded it, slipped it into my back pocket that night as I stepped through the gates. Because part of me knew something was waiting, and those rules, they weren't suggestions, they were warnings. I'll tell you what happened on my first night, when I passed the monkey house for the second time, and it was already looking back at me. However, my first night started quiet. The animals were still, their silhouettes barely visible in the pale glow of the path lights. A calm, eerie silence had settled over everything, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring because there's just nothing. At 1:12 a.m., I passed by the aviary. That's when I heard it, faint, almost like the air itself was carrying the sound. Someone was whistling. The melody was soft, slow, and strangely familiar, like a lullaby you forgot you knew. My body went rigid. Every hair on my neck stood up like static had swept through me. Rule 2 flashed in my mind like a warning light. If you hear whistling near the aviary between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., do not investigate. Walk away. Do not turn around. So I walked, 1 foot in front of the other, my heartbeat drumming against my ribs. Resisting the urge to glance back felt like pulling teeth with my mind. The whistling stopped halfway down the next path, just like that. Like whatever had been making the sound knew I wasn't playing its game. That was when I stopped laughing. That was when I started taking the rules seriously. At 2:15, I found myself standing in front of the reptile house. Just for kicks, I checked the door. And of course, it was unlocked. I didn't open it, but I stared at the handle longer than I cared to admit. Something about the air there. It felt thick, tense, like the building was holding its breath. I backed away, and I swear, I felt the weight of something watching from behind the glass. Then came 3:03 a.m. The polar bear enclosure was quiet, but the water, it was wrong. It shimmered with tiny ripples like something just beneath the surface was breathing. It wasn't frozen. I hesitated, then slammed the red button near the window. There was a mechanical groan. Pipes beneath the concrete groaned like a sleeping beast. And then the water began to freeze. Not gradually, not naturally. The ice crept across the surface like veins pulsing and twisting in unnatural patterns. It looked alive, I didn't wait to see what happened next. By the time I circled back toward the monkey house for the second pass, it was just before 4 a.m. Rule 5 was crystal clear. Do not look inside on your second pass. The first time, they'd all been asleep. Little hammocks, peaceful, innocent. This time, I kept my head down, eyes fixed on the path. But then, tap. A soft thud against the glass, tap, tap. Something was trying to get my attention, and God help me, it almost worked. But I clenched my jaw and kept walking faster. By then, every nerve in my body was on edge. Every instinct screamed the same thing. These rules aren't a joke. They're survival instructions, and breaking them, that's not a mistake you get to make twice. I had no idea what the rest of the night had in store, but I knew this. Something wanted me to slip, just once. All it would take was one wrong step, and the worst was yet to come. At 4:44 a.m., I reached the maintenance shed. The light inside was on. It shouldn't have been. That faint glow leaking out from beneath the door was wrong, not just out of place, but off. Like the light itself didn't want to be seen. Still, I had a job to do. I opened the door slowly. The shed was empty, completely still. But the heat, it rolled out like breath from a furnace, thick and stifling. One bulb hung above, flickering faintly like it was straining to stay alive. I reached up, switched it off, and stepped back. Then I locked the door. From the outside, just like the rule said. That's when I saw her. Far across the park near the penguin exhibit, a child stood by the glass. My blood turned to ice. She looked no older than 6, wearing a red coat and no shoes. Her back was to me, head tilted upward at the enclosure like she was waiting for something. I didn't need to see her face, I already knew. If you see a child near the penguin exhibit, do not speak to them. They are not lost. Keep walking. I turned away, each step heavier than the last. My heart pounded like war drums. I didn't look back, and I didn't sleep when I got home. The second night was worse. At 1:30 a.m., I passed the aviary again, but this time it wasn't just whistling. Number when the tune ended, almost. A voice whispered, "Jacob," my name. The sound slid into my ear like a cold finger. I ran, sprinted, to the nearest break room, slammed the door shut and locked it behind me. Then I stared at the clock. 6 minutes. That's all I had to survive. At minute 3, something tapped on the door. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Even blinking felt like it might break the spell. Then, silence. Eventually, the clock struck 6 minutes, and I stepped back into the halls like a man returning from war. At 3:03 a.m., I reached the polar bear enclosure. The water was already frozen solid, so I left it alone, as instructed. But near the monkey house, I slipped. I looked. I wish I could say it was the monkeys again. Sleeping, familiar, safe. But what stood in their place? They weren't monkeys. They were things. Too many eyes, no faces, bodies that swayed like meat on hooks. They moved in unison, pressed to the glass, and watched me. One of them opened its mouth, a gaping void that stretched all the way to its chest, and let out a noise that should not exist. I ran. I don't remember how I got to the exit. I barely remember driving home. The next morning, I found Mr. Halverson waiting at the gate. I told him I was done, that I quit. He didn't argue. He just looked at me with those hollow eyes and said, "Then you shouldn't have broken the rules. Some doors don't close once they've been opened, especially the ones you weren't supposed to touch in the first place." That night, I didn't go in. I stayed home. I locked the doors, I drew the curtains, I kept every light on in the house like it would make a difference. I told myself I'd quit, that it was over. But at 3:03 a.m., my doorbell rang, just once. I didn't move, I didn't answer. I sat frozen, hands trembling, breath caught in my chest. In the morning, I opened the door. There was no package, no note, no sign of anyone, just claw marks. Deep, jagged streaks across the porch boards, like something had been waiting, pacing, or scratching to be let in. I tried to leave town that afternoon, packed a bag, grabbed my keys, bolted for the car. It wouldn't start. Battery was fine, gas tank full. But when I turned the key, nothing. Just dead silence. And when I looked up in the rearview mirror, just for a second, I saw it. A red coat, tiny feet, standing in the middle of my driveway, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. Now, every time I pass a mirror, I catch a flash of it, just behind me. Too quick to focus on, too real to ignore. Last night, I looked out the window. Miles away, across the valley, the zoo sat like a dark silhouette against the forest. And the maintenance shed light was on. From here, I could see it. That impossible little glow in the distance, flickering like a signal, like a summons. Something followed me, I can feel it. The rules weren't just for the zoo, they were for after. For the ones who leave and aren't supposed to, because the truth is, once you work the night shift at Grizzly Falls Wildlife Park, you don't really leave. And this morning, there was a note taped to my front door, typed, same font as the others, same blood red ink. It said, 8. You must return by the 7th night, or we will come get you. Tonight is night 6. And I think they've already started walking